Hey love, what's up? Welcome to Confidently Uncomfortable. I'm your host J.Lo, health and lifestyle coach and not so regal confidence queen. Coming at you with the real, the raw, and of course, the uncomfortable. My mission is to show you that to be confident, it has absolutely nothing to do with being perfect or having it all together, and everything to do with you getting uncomfortable and pushing your limits. Thanks for joining me. Let's dive in. So on today's episodes, I may be ruffling some feathers. I might offend you, and that's okay. I'm not here to make everyone agree with me all the time, but I am here to show different perspectives on things. So I'm going to be, kicking up some dirt and bringing back some things that were controversial not too long ago. But ultimately, the entire point of this conversation that I'm having with myself, but I would love to hear your side of things today, is to learn how to stop judging others as well as ourselves. So just to preface this in a general state, basically, we often are very quick to judge people, right? Like we do judge books by a cover. We do make quick judgments. We make brash judgments. We make assumptions. And then we also do those same types of judgments and harsh negative thoughts towards ourselves as well. So I'm going to use a big controversial example and then kind of bring it back to you and where you're at, whether you are stuck in this judgment of quick judgments of others, or you're working through that, or it's just judging yourself and you feel like you're constantly hating on yourself and bringing yourself down, or just not feeling in the best space. So here it goes. It's been a while since the J.Lo and Shakira controversy at the Super Bowl. So I feel like it's something that needs to be addressed, but I feel like there's a deeper meaning to it than what people are just saying, like whether or not they were like, this was offensive or no, it wasn't, or whatever that is. So if you've been living in a hole and you didn't watch the Super Bowl this past February, the biggest thing is that many people found offensive the halftime show when J.Lo was dancing on the pole, especially, among other things in the Super Bowl halftime show. My mother included. Yeah, my mom reposted some Facebook thing. Don't you love when people just repost an article without reading it? I knew she hadn't read it and I called her out on it, so I'm calling her out on it again. But basically, a lot of people were offended and they felt like J.Lo should be ashamed of herself and she should be ashamed that even like her daughter saw the show. And I wanted to give it some time to kind of settle because now you don't have to come at it from such a heated standpoint. I'm going to come at it in a more of a reflective standpoint on ourselves as well as like our overall like society norms. So I don't want this to be a part of drama and I don't want you to immediately tune me out. And I also don't want you to think that I'm just assuming the other side is wrong. I'm coming from a different point of view. I'm in my 20s. I don't have kids and I do recognize that. So if some of it seems a little one-sided, just know that I'm explaining my side, my thoughts on this, and really wanting to kind of shed light on some other aspects as far as judgment is concerned. So flashing back, I was actually surprised when I woke up and the next morning saw that there was even controversy about the halftime show. I mean, no one's nipples came out. This was not a Janet Jackson issue. Like, I didn't think anything of it. I actually Googled where to find pole dancing classes near me because I thought it was so freaking cool. If you haven't taken a pole dancing class, I am an athlete. I've done pole vaulting. I've done a high jump. I've done so many different things that are a lot of strength-oriented things, powerlifting, and pole dancing is such a sport. It is really intense and fun, and I had so much fun with it when I did it. So I highly recommend it. Don't bash it till you try it. That's for dang sure. I really, though, going back to this, I woke up and I didn't think much about it. I didn't think it was going to be an issue. Like, I didn't see it as being too wrong or too sexual. Like, it was the halftime show, so I expected women to be dancing in their costumes, and I expected it to be all out, and that's really what I felt like we got from it. It was definitely like alluding to her movie that involved that specific type of dance. Same with Shakira using her dancing. It was more of cultural, and it was bringing back everything with her ties in her Hispanic culture. So I thought all of it was really, really cool how they brought it all together. So yeah, I definitely was surprised, And one of the biggest things that I was surprised about as far as the haters were that most of the people I saw commenting on how they were offended were women. Seriously, most of the people were women, and a lot of times mothers, and they were offended that their child was seeing these things or whatever. And again, coming from my perspective, so I want to reiterate that. But the truth is, like, you have control over what your child sees. Knowing that, they could have left the room. Like, I think my mom might have made me leave the room when Janet Jackson's nipple came out. I was actually at my neighbor's Alex's house, so that's not true. I got to see the whole show. But for the most part, your parents can control what your child sees, but also they see so much worse. Like, if you go on TikTok, y'all, if you're not on TikTok yet, I am, and it is highly addicting. Like, freaking love TikTok. But the truth is, if your kids are on it, they're seeing way worse things on that app than on a halftime show. Like, you are seeing some crazy dancing, and they might even be the ones doing it. And again, I'm not coming from judgment there because they're not my kids. Like, if it's your kids, then you can call that judgment. And same with J.Lo is like her. I think that to immediately put it on like she's a bad mother for like she should be ashamed of herself is a little insane. But honestly, if you are one of these people who you're listening to this and you're already like, oh, she's so one-sided, I want you to ask yourself, were you offended by this halftime show, by specifically the dancing, maybe the pole dancing, because you truly think it was wrong? Or is this really an issue of your own self-confidence? So hear me out. All right? This is where the judgments came out. A lot of what I was noticing, again, this is me coming from a observant situation. I was watching people comment. I was watching people make judgments on the halftime show, and a lot of them were middle-aged women who were 50 or higher, okay? And they were offended by this dance, and they were offended by J.Lo's body and showing too much of her body and showing so much of her skin and her outfit and everything like that. But here's the thing. She was killing it, and she just broke the freaking mold of what people should expect from middle-aged women, right? So that was the first thing in itself. Like, ask yourself, I wonder if they had had a younger halftime performer that was wearing less clothes and doing these things, if it would have been less offensive to them somehow. Like, they were expecting it. If it was like Kesha or, oh God, I don't know what the young people listen to these days, but one of those girls, if they just were expecting something like that. Whereas with J.Lo, because she is quote unquote older, I don't even think that's old, but because she's 50 or higher, because she's like middle age, as you would call it, that is more offensive because she's not quote like staying in her lane, or she's breaking out of the box of what you would expect from a mother who is in her 50s, So that's something to kind of question yourself, is maybe that's more of a society thing, putting that pressure on you. Also, I think a lot of times, my whole thought behind her halftime show was like, I was rooting for her because she's paved the way to show me that I don't have to be some cookie cutter in a box, like, home wife. Like, I can have a kid, I can still dance, I can still have fun, and I can still be comfortable in my own sexuality and still feel really attractive. I think a lot of times we as women, especially generations that came before me, we were stuck in this zone of like, you couldn't have a voice, you couldn't speak out, sexuality, like, what was that? Like, sex was literally only for having children and procreating. And like, I think that women that are older than me, like my mother's age, didn't have as much time to explore in their sexuality maybe, or they feel like it's been stifled, or there's just so many different reasons that we are putting judgment on other people. And a lot of times it has to do with the way we're feeling and judging ourselves. So we're coming in a space of feeling like they shouldn't have worn those things, or how dare they do that, when really we need to look at ourselves and be like, am I really just uncomfortable with my own body? Am I really just uncomfortable with my own sexuality? Like, I don't want you to go around blaming and offending other people. Like, it starts with you. Look at yourself. And I know that this might just be surface level and you're like, no, I just didn't want my kid to see this. And if that's that, I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry that's the issue. But I do want you to think deeper of if there's anything deeper rooted between you, because the fact that I was noticing more women were offended than men, I really think that has to do with the idea behind women's sexuality and the idea behind a lot of women in that older age range were told how to dress, we're told what was right and what was wrong. I mean, we're still told that today, but we are breaking out of it more and more to where we're like, we don't have to dress a certain way to please other people. We do what's best for us. And I think that that needs to continue to happen. I think that that's one of the things I'm saying is like, I was inspired by this, not because I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so sexual or tantalizing. I'm like, dang, she's hot, but not putting myself down, but she is like killing it with her moves. So passionate, worked really freaking hard to do all these things. And so I saw it more of a positive thing, so I want you to take the time to do that. I think that it's kind of crazy coming back to judgment. So this is where we're going to break away from the halftime show. So whether you do or don't agree with what I'm saying, keep listening because I want to bring it back to judgment in general, how we are quick to judge people and how we are quick to judge ourselves and blame ourselves and shame ourselves. So let's bring it back there and kind of give you a nice little takeaway. So when it comes to judgment, it's crazy. Like how often I see women who are trying to lift themselves up and then immediately being brought down and shamed and like commented on and just bad-mouthed by other women. So women that are trying to do better and trying to grow and trying to thrive and feel confident in their skin are often being torn down by other women. And it's crazy seeing like the women against women more than anything. And I think it goes to this unconscious bias where we believe that women are constantly in competition. That's kind of what we're told. Like think about, okay, if you're not a person in rap, I'm sorry, but I'm going to use these examples. So Nicki Minaj and Cardi B. So Nicki Minaj came before Cardi B as far as rap goes. Now, they were both very well-known rappers, but immediately when Cardi B started to rise up, people started to say, oh, she's so much better than Nicki Minaj, and immediately compared her and basically were trying to push Nicki as if she was like second rate and put Cardi up as if she was the only one. And the truth is that there are so many men in that genre of music that they should both be lifting each other up, and they've recognized that and actually like talked about it together. And I think that that's such an important thing to notice is like we're so quick to assume that there's only one spot for the woman, like there's only one spot, so it's you better like it's such a scarcity mindset. And what I mean by that is like we believe that there are so few space at the table, so few seats at the table for women to succeed that we get very cutthroat and competitive when we're trying to succeed for ourselves. But I believe it's not about competition. I believe if one woman rises above, they're going to lift other people up with them. So it's not about pushing other people down in the process. We've been told that, and subconsciously, we still believe that sometimes, that if one woman rises above, then we're not good enough. So if someone out there is better than us and killing it, let's say another woman is at your weight goal that you want to be at, like her body is where you want to be. Let's say that there's a woman that is at the career that you want. She works with you and you see her thriving at her career and you immediately start picking her apart and judging her, or you start tearing up her thinking, well, who is she? Who does she think she is? Or it's that, or you flip it on yourself and you start to judge yourself. Like, oh, I could never do that. Like I could never wear that. I could never pull that off. Like, have you ever said that before? I could never pull that off, or any of those things that we say. And it's like, we're so quick to judge and compare. We think that there cannot be multiple types of flowers that are growing and thriving. I've said this quote before in one of my posts, but flowers don't compare as they grow. They don't look at the other flower and be like, oh my God, that one's purple and I'm not, that one's so much taller than me. They just freaking grow and they're all beautiful and they all look different and it's awesome. But we think that if we see someone growing and thriving next to us, that it means that we're stuck. It means we can't grow. And that's the opposite, because guess what? If someone's thriving in that same soil as you, you're going to thrive too. It's not a cutthroat thing. And I don't want you to be so judgmental. And that's hard. That's really hard. So we're going to break down a little bit more of the background of where that comes from, and then some things you can do to take that judgment off of other people as well as off yourself. Because I don't want you to take it off of other people and then put it on yourself like, oh no, they're great, but I'm terrible. No, that's not any better for you to do. Okay. So when it comes to judgment, it's everywhere. Like, it's hard to say, oh, this is how you stop judging other people when look at our freaking society. I mean, I'm in it. I mean, look at it. Likes on Facebook and Instagram. You're immediately scrolling and you're making a quick judgment of whether or not they deserve your heart, your like. Like, what? That's insane. So, like, whether or not they deserve a double tap, which is such little energy from your point, but you're like, scroll. They don't deserve it. They're not good enough. You're like immediately make that judgment. Isn't that insane? I'm kind of crazy. I like anyone that's growing a business, I like double tap all their stuff because I'm just like, I want to be the biggest supporter out there for all of you women that are trying to thrive in your businesses, just FYI. But it's so funny that is created to just further like push our tendencies to judge and make quick like rash judgments immediately about someone, right? Same with like Tinder. I mean, I was not around when Tinder was there, but I do know that it is very much like swipe left, swipe right. Like, I don't like, you just do it pretty quickly. I know there are different things out there now than Tinder, and I actually have been to multiple Tinder weddings, so no bash on Tinder. Like, that's awesome if it works for you. But I also want to remind you that it is that initial judgment call. So being open to it in the real world is super important because we're trained not to. We're trained to judge a book by its cover, and I don't want you to do that. I mean, God, right now, The Bachelor and Bachelorette, like those kind of shows, we watch those shows and literally that's all we do is judge people. It's crazy. And I think it's one thing to watch it for entertainment, and like, I'm guilty of it too, but I think the fact that they had to address that there was all this bullying on Instagram, they so basically, if you don't watch this, they had to address that there was so many people that were just cyberbullying these women. And it's insane because that's the biggest thing is cyberbullying is this huge thing. And it's like, we take judgment so far and think it's so normal now that people think it's okay to say these things to humans, to human beings, to other human beings, to talk so down to them as if they are worthless. And that breaks my heart. That makes me question whether we are losing connection with humans, with other humans. Like, if we're just so like desensitized to negativity and judgment and quick rash decisions and emotional like outbursts towards people that we're not even recognizing the effects that those things have. So not only on other people, but on ourselves. So if you're like, hey, I'm not a cyberbully, I have never once commented something mean towards someone. Well, have you ever said something about someone behind their back? Have you ever, let's just take a break from there. Have you ever thought something, looked and immediately thought like, oh, she looks so mean, or she looks so rude, or she looks like such a bitch? Like, just boom, immediate thought. Now, the truth is, I don't want you to feel like guilty, like, oh, I'm a terrible person. How dare I have these thoughts? Because we've been in an environment so often that has been negative. And it's like that concept of, think about that episode of Mean Girls where they're all judging themselves in the mirror and they're like, oh my God, my nail bits suck, blah, 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 all these things. And she wasn't used to that environment. And then Caddy just goes, oh, I have really bad breath in the morning. Like, if you haven't watched Mean Girls, go watch it. I've already referenced it in another podcast episode. But that is because then that environment of like tearing ourselves down is so much easier to be a part of than to flip the script and be positive, right? And same thing goes with not only tearing ourselves down, but tearing other people down. It's like, if you're in this environment where everyone's trash talking your boss or something, I'm just trying to think of something like that's a little less cringy, but this trash talking your boss, and you're like, it's so much easier for me to just trash talk them than to not say anything, or to call them on their shit. That is really hard, like to really say something. So first steps when it comes to kind of breaking away from these quick judgments. So let's start with judging other people. So if you are someone who kind of does that, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily a cyberbully, but let's just say that your brain is quick to make a judgment about someone. We all do, for the record. We all do it. We're trained to categorize people. We're trained to, it's like a survival of the fittest thing, basically. We're trained to basically see someone and see whether they're going to help elevate us or not, or like bring us down. And so it's a survival thing, but it's also, you need to remind yourself that you're human, you're not an animal, and you can rise above that. So recognize that when it happens, just be like, wait, am I making a judgment too quickly? And so giving yourself time to actually get to know that person, that's something that I think is super important. I also like to make sure, like when if you do catch yourself like making a judgment about someone, good or bad, be like, okay, well, what real things have I gotten to know about them? Like, is it just things that I'm learning about them that they're posting on social media? Is it just things that other people are saying about them? Is it one time I saw them when maybe they were like in a really bad mood? So you don't know the full picture. And so that's something that I always remind myself and my clients is you never know what someone else is going through that day. Because we'll talk about something and everyone will get deep about what's going on in their life. I'm like, when you met that person in your group, did you even know that they had all this going on? And they're like, no, I didn't. I'm like, think about that every time you walk across somebody, every time you brush somebody that maybe is angry or bitter or has an RBF and it just looks so like mean, they are probably hurting, So instead of assuming the worst about someone, have compassion, and that will slow your judgment. That compassion and stopping, like, wait a minute, maybe they're having a really hard day, will help you slow the judgment. Now, the other thing that will help you is if you are quick to judge, it could be your environment. Check yourself. Are you around people? Like, who are the people you spend the most time with? And then think about how they are. Do they speak poorly about people a lot? Do they talk about other people behind their backs? Are they just super negative Nancy's? And if they are, then that environment might need to shift. So if you're wanting to make these changes, it's a lot easier to take that step out of your environment and then change yourself, opposed to trying to change yourself while you're in that environment. That's really hard. So take that step out of your environment, work on yourself and your own thoughts, and then you can work back into helping other people that are in the environment. So really help yourself first. That whole concept of like, put that oxygen mask on yourself before helping others applies here, okay? And so that has to do with judging other people. Now, judging yourself, same thing goes with that. If you're in an environment where everyone's bringing themselves down, everyone's super negative, everyone's always talking about everything that's wrong with themselves and with the world or whatever, that is only going to make you gravitate towards those thoughts, okay? So I challenge you to shift those thoughts. Now, if you're in a situation, work, for example, and you're like, oh, God, I work with these people, I can't get away from it. I don't want you to say that word. Don't say you can't do something, but what can you control? So find that space in the morning where you can control your thoughts, and you can start with gratitude. Again, I talk about gratitude all the time. It's so powerful, but start your morning off with writing down things that you're grateful for. If you're starting to judge your body in the mirror, flip that script and say something that you love about yourself. If it's not your body that day, it's okay. Say something else that you love about yourself, and then write some things in your life that you're grateful for. So that's going to help you start in a positive state every single day. So then if you're working around people that you can't really get away from, or if you're going to a family event and you can't really get away from, and there's just a lot of negativity around there, I don't want that negativity to breed more negativity in yourself. Because a lot of times, if you are trying to not judge people or not be mean towards other people, we can shift that towards ourselves and be mean towards ourselves or judge ourselves. And I don't want you to do that. So instead, really hype yourself up, especially in the morning, especially when no one else has gotten on your agenda yet. And then that will really help you kind of put on that armor for the day. If you find yourself starting to be pulled back down into that negative mindset, into that judgmental mindset, I want to do an afternoon pick-me-up. And so that doesn't mean go have some crazy drink in the middle of the afternoon. I mean, go do something for yourself for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever amount of time you have. Take your whole lunch and go walk around at the park and listen to your favorite song. Go take your perspective elsewhere, because if you are stuck in that environment and you stay there, it's going to be really hard to pull yourself out. So just do some self-care checks there. Those are the biggest things when it comes to judgment. We are very quick to compare, whether we are bringing someone else down or we're just like, no, I'm not mean to other people, but you still might be being mean to yourself. So it is not about comparing. We just had International Women's Day, and it is so cool to instead be inspired by other people. If someone is in a position that you are like, wow, I could never do that, don't see it as a negative. See it as like, wow, she has paved the way for me to go even farther. Like, these women are breaking the ceiling so that my daughter does not have to question anything that she does, as far as it being like, oh, well, like boys will look down on her for that or whatever, like BS that we've been taught our whole lives. Like, I literally have been taught that my whole life. Like, dress codes for girls were literally just so that boys wouldn't get distracted. Literally, that was what they told us. They didn't want boys to get distracted. Now, I get it to an extent, don't get me wrong, but I also think that being the reason is ludicrous, like insane, that I'm like, okay, we need to change as a society and quit putting that on women as like that being the only solution. Let's quit sexualizing things that don't need to be sexualized. And then other things, just meeting them in the sense of like, wow, that is coming from a place of confidence. Quit putting other people down and just lift them up. Watch how that shifts things, because things that you might think is like, oh, that's so sexual. When you look into a culture, it's not. Like going back to J.Lo and Shakira's dances, like a lot of that comes from cultural backgrounds. A lot of that comes from what they wanted to bring in from their own careers and things that they worked on throughout their entire lives. And so that was a culmination of all those things. They weren't like, oh, I really, really, really want to pole dance, so then that is like all I'm doing is sexualizing myself. No, they wanted to feel sexy and confident, yes, but it did not have to revolve around those things. So don't assume that that's what it was. Don't assume that someone doing something that is outside of your own comfort zone is wrong. Okay? I think that there's a little more gray area there. And I think that these societal standards need to be broken anyway. So let's break them up and do it. Just break it up. Quit having all these rules that you think that we're supposed to have, and create them for yourself. You set your own standards and then go from there. I know this was a lot of a rant, but I would like to know your thoughts. Whether you feel differently or just have different opinions about the halftime show. I would love to know your thoughts on just judgments in general in the female community, whether it's like girl versus girl or girl versus herself or whatever. I mean, it's something that tears people down. That judgment is exhausting, whether you're doing it towards other people or yourself. It is time wasted, right? If you are constantly thinking about what someone else is doing, then you're not focused on yourself. If you're constantly thinking about what's wrong with you and judging yourself, you're not able to lift yourself higher. So that judgment is just an obstacle that is weighing you down. Take it off. Let it go. You're better than that. I love you. I really do. Whether you are like so pissed about this episode or not, I still love you. I'm excited for next week's episode because we're diving into feminine and masculine energy. This one was definitely more on the femme side of things and just talking through that. If you want to hear me talk deeper about any of this issue, I would love to know. If you have any opinions or thoughts on this, would love to know too. I'm all about open discussion. This was very one-sided. You know why? Because there's only one person recording this podcast right now. So it's okay if you don't agree with everything. But just know that I'm open to having a conversation anytime. And that's what I think is beautiful about this world, is we can continue to have our own opinions. So thank you for joining me today. I don't want you to judge yourself. I want you to feel free and confident and sexy and have an amazing, amazing life that you have created. And I just want to remind you, it is possible and it doesn't involve tearing other people down. Thank you guys, and I'll see you next time. Thanks again for listening to Confidently Uncomfortable. I love being able to connect with you here and honestly don't want it to end. So head over to my Facebook group, Body Confident Blueprint, and be sure to follow me on Insta at JGoFitLife. Also, if you're ready to get real confidently uncomfortable, go leave this podcast a 5-star review and email me the review screenshot, support@jagofit360.com, for a chance to win a free 30-minute fitness audit and goal setting session. I appreciate your support. See you next time.